Hello, and welcome to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe. I'm the editor of the Flyfish Journal and the host of Sidechannels, along with our photo editor and my good friend, Kopi Voita. Since 2009, the Flyfish Journal has been fly fishing's independent voice for culture, people, art, and adventure. Owned by fly fishers and produced near the water. Like our print publication, Sidechannels will feature culture, adventure, art, and conservation through thought-provoking, in-person interviews with fly fishing's most compelling individuals. Visit theflyfishjournal.com/sidechannels to learn more and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, there's no other way to say it, like going the wrong way. Like, yeah. And so I start giving motions for where to go. And in rafting, you point positive. Like you should never point at, there's a rock, you should point at where you want the people to go. So pointing positive. So I'm pointing for where to go. And he's just going the opposite. I think he thinks I'm saying, there's a hole or there's the wave or there's an obstacle or there's a problem or something, and I'm thinking as this is happening, I'm like, oh, Delaney, get that throw bag ready. Cause this is something's going to happen, And so she did. And sure as shit, like they came through and the second that they hit, they went right smack dab through the meat into this. It's like a surfing wave and a big wave and, and it just dump trucked them.
That was guide, outfitter, filmmaker, writer, and otherwise multi-hyphenate conservationist Hilary Hutcheson. And you're listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe, and I'm the editor of the Flyfish Journal as well as your host, along with our photo editor and my good friend, Kopi Voita. Kopi and I would love it if you became a subscriber to the Flyfish Journal because the only thing that brings us more joy than happy fish sucking up flies on rivers, lakes, and flats is the thought of you enjoying the 116 pages of fly fishing, culture, and storytelling that gets delivered straight to your mailbox 4 times each year with a subscription. Give it a go. And of course, if you're enjoying Sidechannels, let us know. Like, follow, subscribe, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It really does help us reach new listeners, which helps us keep bringing you in-depth, compelling conversations with some of fly fishing's most interesting people. The other thing that helps us is support from Decked. Decked makes bulletproof truck bed drawer systems in addition to offering toolboxes, cargo gliders, and an array of accessories that make life easier when you practice a gear-intensive pastime like fly fishing. My Decked system has been a game changer this summer. I can't imagine life without it. Get Decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish. And of course, Sidechannels is also sponsored by Patagonia Fly Fishing. Patagonia's commitment to making solid gear that stands up to all of the abuse you can throw at it is matched by their dedication to seeking out, fostering, and telling great stories about fly fishing culture and conservation. It's a level of quality that isn't measured in weeks or months. Theirs is a long-term commitment. They utilize clever engineering and innovative materials to offer only essential gear built for a lifetime of hard use. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fishing for some great conservation stories and some of the most dependable fly fishing gear you can find, built to connect with wild fish and wild places. So our guest today is Hilary Hutcheson. Hilary, I think, is one of those people who you just feel like you already know, even if you've never met her, thanks to her presence in the world of fly fishing media and culture. She's been in a number of films. She's made a few herself. She's an outspoken advocate for fisheries, both her own and others. And she's a writer and brand ambassador, a fly shop owner. Basically, she does it all. The really refreshing thing about her, though, is the fact that that person you see in the films or in advertisements or in clips on C-SPAN as she testifies before Congress in support of various conservation issues, that's Hilary. Straight up, she's fully stoked at all times, and at the same time, one of the most generous and genuine individuals you'll ever meet. More than once, I've heard stories of people approaching her, looking for support, advice, beta, and she takes them under her wing as if they're old friends, which is certainly not something that can be said for every fishing guide and outfitter out there, and people with a presence and personality as big as Hilary's. The thing about Hilary is her heart is even bigger. And she shows no signs of stopping. In the past year, she's hosted trips internationally, testified before Congress. She recently completed work on a documentary. As I record this, she's likely neck deep in her summertime's main focus, which is running the rafting and fishing program at Glacier Anglers and Outfitters in West Glacier, Montana. And on top of all that, she owns a fly shop called Lary's Fly and Supply in nearby Columbia Falls, Montana. Kopi and I visited Hilary out in Columbia Falls back in the spring, and it was really the first time I've ever had the chance to sit down with her and figure out what makes her click, which to a large extent is the thing that I really love about doing this podcast. But even better than that, she took us fishing later that afternoon, and I've got to say, I feel like I learned so much about trout fishing just spending a day in a boat with Hilary and seeing how well she knows her home river, the Flathead, and how much she cares about it. That intimate knowledge that she has of her fishery is something I've only seen with a few people over the years. And having that opportunity was great. I really enjoyed it. And the fishing was a lot of fun as well. So it was an unforgettable afternoon, both for the fishing and the company. We had a great time seeing Hilary on her home turf, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Let's get to the show. Hilary, it's so good to see you. I think the last time I saw you was like maybe at IFTD in like 5 years ago.
Oh yeah,
Like
pre-COVID.
yeah,
before the blip.
A while back. But we're here in Columbia Falls,
Mm-hmm.
And we were originally planning to talk with you tomorrow, but your schedule kind of got shifted. You were going to be going to a tournament. Now you're going to DC.
Yeah.
Is that right?
There's a Senate Budget Committee hearing on Wednesday that I'm testifying at.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What's the issue? What are you testifying for?
The topic is the impact of climate change on the outdoor rec economy. Yeah. So that's kind of my whole life.
Yeah.
So that's I won't say it's an easy one for me to speak on because it's so heavy and it's so tough, but it is for me, like it's kind of the root of all of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a big topic. What are you like? How do you go into that? How do you prepare for that?
Well, it's, I really like checking out the government process. Like I like to see how government works, and I always have. I think it's like this whole nother world that seems so far away from here, and yet it's part of our everyday life all the time. I remember when I was a little kid, my mom got selected for jury duty, and I was like, well, that seems like a huge pain in the ass. And she was like, this is like the most simple and basic way to explain to you how important our participation is in this democracy. She's like, we get to be part of the future of our peers, and justice and this is huge. And if you get selected for jury duty, you better freaking do it, and that really stuck with me. But I was also always hoping, please don't choose me. Please don't choose me. But so I always thought about that. And then also in high school, like going to our close up, government trip to DC and seeing how everything works. It was always super interesting to me. And I think for me personally, I never wanted to be in politics at any level, but my participation as a citizen, I felt like was always really important. Like you should always speak up. You should, write down your feelings. You should elect champions for whatever it is that you feel strongly about. Yeah. And that we can. Like, I remember also growing up in this town, a lot of times because it does feel so removed even from Helena, our capital, and from DC, people would be like, well, your vote doesn't matter. I'm not voting. I don't like any of the candidates and always. And I was like, well, that seems crazy because it's like what we can do. And so I did have to test that theory. And so once I started doing things like talking to our elected leadership in Helena and in Washington, D.C., I actually could see some of those results of that testimony. And I think the first time I did that was in 2016, when the Obama administration needed to try to gather information about climate to pass on to the next incoming administration. I went and spoke before the White House Committee on Sports and Energy. And they had all of these different professional sports. There was everything from soccer to basketball to NFL to NASCAR to bowling to, golf. And they were just looking at the impacts of climate change on all of these sports, just so that they could, and it was just one of the things they were trying to gather information on and kind of put it together to pass on to the next administration, whoever it might be at that point. This was in August of 2016. So they were trying to get this done, before they knew who it was, so that it didn't matter. They would just pass it on. And so that was really cool because I read the report after they published it. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that I was saying about the river were in there, like hoot owl regulations, which since then we've been experiencing, of course, every single year. And we talk about it every year. And at that time, I remember sitting around that big table in this White House committee, and they had never heard of the government, putting down regulations that kept you off the river because the river's too low, too warm, for viability for trout. So that was kind of cool, and to see it published. And then to see some of those things come out in some big media that kind of like, I thought helped drive policy was important. Unfortunately, that whole report was thrown away. And so you just have to keep going, You just got to do it again.
At the same time, though, that probably had to feel really good, even though it was like thrown out. It probably had to feel really good for you to kind of raise these, not necessarily issues, but just like to bring that stuff to people's attention who had no clue that was kind of like a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we assume, because for me, I feel like a lot of times maybe I'm in this vacuum. Everybody knows what something like hoot owl regulations are, and it's, of course they don't. Like, it's not everybody's world all the time. Like, it is mine. So I think remembering that on this planet, we actually are all together, then you can share a lot of best practices and share your grievances. And that's why right now, like, kind of for me, the big thing is this connectivity between all of our fisheries that have all these different environmental challenges. So there's like menhaden issue up in the Northeast and in Massachusetts and all along that coast. And then you've got like redfish issues going down in the Southeast. And then, of course, you have all of the Everglades stuff in Florida, and then oyster stuff in Texas, and Pacific Northwest steelhead, and, of course, no pebble mine in Alaska, and all that. And so you go all the way around the country. And I'm finding that my clients, and then also guides and anglers, are pretty sophisticated in other people's fisheries now, because one, you're seeing them, you're hearing them. It's in news, and you see it in social media, people asking for help and kind of trying to gather ideas for how to solve some of these problems. But also, we're seeking out how to solve our own problems based on what's happening in other areas. Like, especially people up in the Mountain West are like, wow, like, look at how many people Captains for Clean Water in Florida has been able to garner and get up into Tallahassee. How can we do that in Helena? Stuff like that. So I think sharing our grievances and best practices has become kind of the way pretty recently. And that, I think, creates kind of a big global fishery that hopefully will be the way to solve them all.
Yeah. I like that idea, the kind of a global fishery. Like when you were saying that, excuse me, just thinking about, we're here on the Flathead River, and just how far this water goes. Mm-hmm. And I know you and Liam worked on that movie Drop. I guess that was 4 or 5 years ago now. that really kind of put that in perspective, following a drop of water all the way from Montana to the Pacific. And yeah, just thinking about the scale of some of these problems and how, really if we're thinking about something on the Flathead or on the Columbia or on the Snake or whatever it is, it's all these little things, but it's an entire watershed issue. It's a global issue. So
yeah, that film taught me tons in making it and living it, while we were working on it during the pandemic, which was brutal. Like that was really hard to make a movie during the pandemic. But while we were making it, and it kind of was taking on its own life, and the story was pretty fluid as it was going along, because we were learning so much about my own watershed and then the connectivity from the source to the sea. The story is following a drop of water from the top of the Continental Divide all the way to the ocean. And it's not like about the river. It's really about the impacts on the economy and its communities that flow has. So, and a lot of the climate solutions you find along the way, the problems, the roadblocks people have run into, and ultimately what it means for the future. And that was the learning part that was huge, because it's all about these cascading ecological effects. And so in science, that means, for example, if you have a super high water year and you have so much water that it's then feeding root systems of shrubs and trees and stuff that didn't used to have that, then they grow bigger and stronger and soak up more water. And so it takes water from the river that you needed for the rest of the summer. So like little things like that are these, if this, then that, then this, then that, then that, then that, and it kind of goes on. That's like something we learned from scientists in that movie, but bigger picture was what cascading ecological effects are when you translate that into your life or into climate action or into your families, your communities, your economy, is these cascading effects. And it might not be cascading ecological effects. It could be cascading biological effects. It could be cascading economical effects, could be cascading societal effects. But just this link that we're all connected, and that the cause and effect that happens is very real. I found that to be kind of a guiding light especially in like climate action and talking about that kind of thing this Wednesday, when I'm at the Senate Budget Committee hearing is, we're talking a lot about the decisions that we make now, really are going to affect tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And it's not just about living right this second.
Who are you going to this hearing just on your own, or are you going with an organization? Were you kind of pulled into it with an organization? How do you even get to the point where you're the person going to sit in front of the Senate?
It's funny. It's cool because there actually is a lot of opportunity out there. I'm going with Protect Our Winters. And I did a House Natural Resources Committee hearing testimony a few years ago with POW as well. And I've been a lot for hill walks and all of that kind of stuff with POW. And it's great because when I first joined POW, I guess more than 10 years ago or something, it was because I couldn't find something in the fly fishing industry that I saw in the snow sports industry. And that was an organization that was training its pros to speak to its elected leadership. So POW had these professional skiers and snowboarders who really had a lot to say, but didn't necessarily know how, where, or when to say it. And so POW would actually give high-level training on how to use your voice, how to use your platform, how to, kind of leverage your powers for good. And there's tons of awesome nonprofits in fly fishing that are able to on their own go and do the same things, but they're not necessarily training the anglers to do that. They're not training their, ambassadors or their professional anglers to go and do that. And so in snow sports, it really works because, there's like often a Wheaties box or a gold medal that those athletes are able to bring. Yeah. And so for me, I was like, I don't have any of that. And so when I first started going, and I remember I called up Jeremy Jones and was like, would you ever take somebody who's not a professional skier or snowboarder? And he's like, well, we can't be seasonal in this effort. So we all need winter, and you need winter as much as the skiers and snowboarders do. So yeah, for sure. And so then what I found was that there was just like it helped, it complemented kind of this more like year round type of an effort to speak. So while POW, the majority of trips to DC are with POW for me, while I'm there, I see it's like Alice in Wonderland where you turn around the corner and you see all of these people, you know. So there'll be people from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. There'll be people from American Rivers. There'll be people from Trout Unlimited. All of these different organizations that I work with. You go around the corner and they're all working super hard for rivers, and so it's really encouraging. Like, so for example, this week, when I arrive on Tuesday, we've got American Rivers. Back-to-back meetings with, centered all the players that we care about right now. Senators from pretty much most of the states in the Mountain West, and then all of these different issues who we're talking about having issues with. Florida and Alaska and Maine and all the time. I mean, this is happening every session. You've got people from all of these nonprofits showing up and having all these meetings. So it's really cool. It's not just like, boom, it's this unique thing that I show up and this happens. It's like, it's pretty cool. It's happening all the time. Yeah.
Do you feel optimistic, generally speaking, when it comes to all of these big things, or?
Like optimistic in general? Or do you mean like when I go to talk to folks?
Well, I guess what I mean, in general, do you find that you feel hopeful about the future? It sounds like you do.
Yeah.
But I'm always curious about that, and I like to ask people that question. Partly maybe for selfish reasons, because I like to hear from people who I respect and who are smart and who say they are optimistic, because it makes me feel hopeful. Because I find that I can very easily slip into the feeling of like everything's effed.
Yeah.
And there's big power players somewhere that are just going to destroy it all.
Yeah.
And, so I like to ask people that, because I think it gives me hope.
Right.
It sort of knocks me out of that rut that I can get into sometimes.
I mean, I'm big on the pendulum swinging, where you have to remind yourself it's okay to be in the rut and to feel pretty shitty about the way things are, because in a lot of ways things are pretty shitty. And I think, I talk about this all the time because it's one of the things that cracks me up and gives me hope. Is I remember, I think the first time I ever met Yvonne Chenard, and I was expecting to get some sort of like inspirational, hopeful, encouraging message for go get after it and save the planet.
Yeah. And
I think I asked him like, "Whoa, what should we do?" And you're kind of like you climbed the mountain to talk to the guru, and what should we do, sir? And he's like, the planet's toast. And so I was like, okay, I'll see you later, So, but what the reason that was hopeful to me, and the reason that's an important message, is because he can feel that way, and we can feel that way at many different times in all of our efforts. But you have to keep going, and it's okay to like feel like some of the stuff you did or the way you feel doesn't really work, and that might not work out. But you have to keep going, because like the 2 steps forward, 1 step back is just a regular pendulum of life. It just like happens all the time. So am I hopeful? Overall, yeah, I think that's also a character thing. I'm generally optimistic, hopeful person, but I am very aware of the crap, like for sure. I'm very aware that there are those steps back. And sometimes I feel like we've slid way back. Like, that it's not 2 steps forward, 1 back, but it was like chutes and ladders. You play chutes and ladders, and sometimes you're back to the freaking beginning. And I was 2 steps away from, winning the whole thing,
Yeah.
And so that happens a lot to all of us. And so I think like in terms of the planet, I have to look at history and some of the big successes that were really important that helped me be here with my friends and family in this capacity on the river now, which would be like the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. You know, I mean, in the 60s, even before I was born, not that long before I was born, but, you know, before I was born, all of those major environmental pieces of history that were planted that still exists today were huge and largely planted by Republicans and people who knew that we were going to have to be back together probably at different times in our lives, revisiting some of these issues, but they had to put those important things in place to make sure that we didn't wreck it too soon. You know, I think they probably knew at some point we'd chip away, and that's just our human nature. But to see a lot of those legislative efforts happen back in the 60s that right now have allowed me to be where I am, I think that gives me hope. Because if we could do it then, you know, then we have to be able to rely on our ability to make it happen again. That's another thing I'm talking about on Wednesday is like, you know, thank you for being part of this process that allowed us to have the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. You know, that has, even though there's fewer than 1/4% of our nation's rivers are protected under it, being able to look at how that particular act has been able to protect the river and also drive the economy, that shows we can do both, you know?
Yeah. What did activism and fly fishing, were these things that you were aware of from a young age? Like, did that stuff start early for you?
Yeah, I think so. My parents definitely are rooted in, I don't know if it's, they would call it activism, but being active in your passions and what you care about. So they're very much like, you don't pass go unless you commit to the resource first. I was aware of public lands and understanding public lands before I think we even called it public lands, you know, in our family. It's just, I'm a product of public lands. All of my jobs have been in the National Park Service, the Forest Service, and in public lands. And my parents too. They're both National Park Service employees, retired, and botanists and wildlife managers, and like really rooted in. Again, I think that has to do with like our public process and like public domain and understanding our roles and responsibilities there. So that was really deep rooted. My parents are cool because they never drove anything home. Like they are never on a soapbox. They're not like, this is this and that is that. It's just really living by example. And so they were very much like, if you don't like it, whatever it is, then you actually have an opportunity to talk about it, to stand up and do something, or to organize. Or my mom's so weird. She like makes up words that I didn't know weren't words until later on when I was in journalism, and I would try and use them, and there'd be like red pens all over. But she'd be like, mobilate. She would always say, you know, she just is, and she knows what all the words are. She just like is quirky and would change things around. And so I would be like, we need to mobilate. People would be like, what is that? You need to mobilize, or you need to move, or what, you know? That's awesome. So I remember I was very much like driven by their idea that we have an opportunity in America to act, you know, and I guess that's activism. But like, you know, my dad joined the school board and became school board chair when we were kids. And he did not have time, and he did not want to do that, but he felt like it was really important. We were in school and somebody had to do it, and, you know, stepping up like that. And they were always volunteering. You know, my parents still volunteer 20 hours a week at this food bank, you know, in their retirement, and at their church, and, you know, lots of volunteering. So volunteerism was always really big, and activism very rooted in my family.
Were you fly fishing at a young age, or when did fly fishing kind of come into the picture?
Yeah. So we never fished like conventional or anything as a family, other than we went camping. You know, we'd have like a pole, like a conventional spin rod, but just for your camping, as your camping stuff, you know, and you only got it out when you went camping, and I had a little neighbor kid, Jeff, who taught me to conventional fish when we were really little, like, you know, when we were 6 and 7. We had this canal out, this backwater to the Flathead River, and we'd fish in there all the time. And I loved being on the river, but never fishing until probably 5th grade. And it went right into fly fishing. So started fly fishing 5th and 6th grade. My buddy Rich, had his grandmother had a trailer out by the river on West Glacier. We were always messing around there, and the story that I tell, it's so funny because Steve Duda told me back when he was at the Fly Fish Journal that, like, it's okay if your stories fluctuate sometimes because it's freaking storytelling. But sometimes, like, I've heard this story told back in a bunch of different ways, and I'm not exactly sure which way. You know, people get like busted in their memoirs or something like that. Like that wasn't true. So like I've told the story differently, and slightly differently, and I've heard it differently. But what I remember is that Rich and I were playing either Nerf football or Frisbee. Can't remember exactly. Got it stuck in a tree. Needed to get it out of the tree. Went into the shed. There was like a long stick, and it was a fly rod in, you know, his uncle's shed on his grandma's property, and got it down, and he came running down. The uncle came running down and was like, "Be careful with that. You know, it's a delicate fly rod." And so we started fly fishing then. So that was like in 5th and 6th grade, and just right out in front of the house. And we would bring cutthroat in to his grandma to eat. Yeah. And it was like big cutthroat back then, you know, before that was catch and release only, and just started fly fishing for fun. And from there, like that was 5th and 6th grade, and rode my banana seat bike to Snappy's Sports Center in Kalispell and got a fly rod. It was like $35, Daiwa 2-piece, still have, and fished all through 5th and 6th grade, and then junior high, and just like fishing. Like I talk about it sometimes, like it was like going to the skate park. Like it was like, we're badasses. Like, you know, we're like just fly fishing. And same, like with my sister, we'd be paddling in this inflatable kayak and like just being on the river all the time. So it was super fun to be, I think, you know, doing it wrong probably, you know, as kids. But I got one of those little knot books that's like laminated pocketbook, you know, guidebook for knots, and learned all the knots, and same thing for flies, and like, you know, there are all those little guidebooks, you know, I could just put in my pocket and like discreetly look so people wouldn't know I didn't know what I was doing or whatever. But super fun. For me, it was being on the river and like paddling in the kayak and rafting and stuff like that was the primary thing. And then the fishing was like this cool other thing you could do, and maybe something would happen, you know? And then started working at Glacier Raft Company when I was in junior high, was the nanny and the barn boy, they called it back then. Like, so you wash life jackets and back trailers and wash boats and weed whack and make lunches and all of like the maintenance stuff in the barn. I did that in junior high and was nannying the owner's kids, and then started guiding when I started high school. Yeah, my freshman year.
Wow, just guiding raft trips?
Yeah, so we only had raft trips then, even though it was this epic fishery. And so then it wasn't until the movie came out, which was, I think, only 2 years later. So the movie came out 30 years ago, right? Like this was the 30th anniversary, I think.
Yeah, must have been about, yeah.
So, so then, I was guiding raft trips, and then the movie came out, and then I was, I guess, a junior in high school, and then that's when fishing started. Yeah. So then I started guiding fly fishing when, I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's cool.
Here we are.
So it's been there. Yeah. I mean, to pick it up that early, I feel like, and then stick with it is, it obviously must have struck a chord.
Didn't. I quit a whole bunch of times. I quit like 4 times. Like my guide license number, in Montana, your license number goes up every time you have to renew it. And so like in college, I let it expire a couple different times. And then when I had kids, I let it expire a couple different times. So yeah, I kept coming back, but I quit a bunch of different times. Yeah. I've always thought it could be a real job ever since I was a kid. I was like, I love this job, but it also felt like I could continue to do other check it out. Like I didn't feel weird about like, okay, like I have to do this or I have to do that or whatever. I was like, I feel like I could always come back to guiding, you know? When I first started guiding and I was, you know, too young to like take people, gear boating was the big thing. So like multi-days and like I would gear boat trips, like just taking bags down, you know?
Bag boat.
Yeah. And I loved gear boating. So I was like, well, I could, if I don't like people, if it turns out I don't like people, I could gear boat. And then later I was like, well, if I don't want to be a fishing guide, I'd be a raft guide. And then I was like, oh, if I don't want to be a raft guide, I'd be a fishing guide. So you always could like, you know, do whatever you want to do. But I also was like, well, maybe I could go do something totally different. And I never felt weird about it. I was like, I can come back to this. And no, I did. I left lots of times.
Yeah. And you said you studied journalism?
Yep. So I have a journalism degree from the University of Montana. And I became a news anchor during college and then out of college. And I anchored the 10 o'clock news in Portland, Oregon. Hilary Hutcheson, the 10 o'clock news, first live local.
Yes.
I had no idea.
That is.
Yeah.
How long did you do that?
5 years. I was a weekend news anchor and the weekday news anchor fill-in and morning fill-in. And then, I mean, you would, if you go back, you would recognize me because I was the one with like the flip bob cut and like the zigzag part. Yeah, that was me. And, and then did a bunch of field reporter. I was the Faces of Meth campaign where there's the one lady. Yeah, did that one. That was me.
Nice.
It's
not your face.
That's not my face. No, that was my story.
God.
We all worked on that. So that was the glory days of meth. Was a really big deal. So
I remember when those started popping up. And
totally.
It's kind of terrifying.
Terrifying. It was tell me about it. I had like dildos thrown at me and I had like pit bulls coming through the door at me because I was on the governor's task force against methamphetamine because at the time the governor in Oregon was trying to become the first state to get pseudoephedrine taken off of the shelves because it's the number one ingredient in making meth.
Yeah.
And so governors across the country were trying to figure out how to lead in this like war on meth. And so he was like, well, I'm going to put together a task force and it's going to include these news crews. So I was on this like task force to get as much information about meth and the meth culture and all of the problems and stuff. And so I was like embedded for years, along with my team. Like we had a bunch of news people who were working on these meth stories pretty constantly for several years. And there were some wild stories, some crazy stuff happened. But yeah, we won a bunch of Emmy awards. We won a lot of news Emmys for reporting on meth. It's really fun. Yeah.
When was this? When is that period that you were in? That you were working as a news anchor?
I think I showed up I started as a news anchor probably in like 1999 or so before I graduated college, and then showed up in Portland in 2003.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah.
And you worked in Portland for like 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What did you like being in Portland?
Yeah, I loved Portland. Yeah, are you kidding? Like I knew I wouldn't live there forever, but my kids were babies, and so it was like this utopia where there's all the fountains and festivals and like, because I was at the news station, we got like free tickets to the Teletubbies live, you know, and like the Wiggles live. I was like, well, this is something real that happens. People fill this stadium to watch these guys, you know, like, so, and like, you know, Disney on Ice and stuff. Like for me as a kid that I never went to anything like that, you know? And so like taking the little kids to that, the parades and the food, the festivals, like they had, you know, the forestry, center has the chocolate festival. I mean, like just all that stuff that happened. It was just like something every single day. I mean, it was like for sure water skiing, squirrels and stuff everywhere. You know, it was like, it was great. I loved it. And just like the libraries, the Powell's books, and then just like all of the culture that was there. I loved every bit of it.
And coming from Columbia Falls, like I imagine small town, rural Montana-ish, all of a sudden you're in a big city and you're just like, wow, look at all this
Totally.
stuff. This is so awesome.
Yeah, it was a dream.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. And also like I loved all the grit of it too. Like we had a big street kid problem, and I told you like the meth problem and all that kind of stuff in Portland. And I was there for all of it. I'm like, tell me more about these problems, you know? So that's why I thought it was like great to be a reporter then, because I genuinely from the bottom of my heart wanted to get to the root cause of some of these issues, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So how did that sort of chapter come to an end? What made you stop doing that and leave Portland?
Well, it was kind of a pact that between my ex-husband and I that our kids would be raised back in Montana. Oh. You know, he was like, yeah, we'll go wherever until the kids start kindergarten, you know, and then they start kindergarten, come back to Montana. And that was great with me because I loved my upbringing here. I realized that there are holes, like the, you know, cultural piece is a little lacking, and there's not a lot of diversity, and there's not the, you know, all kinds of great food and stuff like that. But it's a great place to live. And I felt like having the kids kick the same dirt that I did would be great. And we had the chance to even do it better, you know? So it was mostly just about coming back to Montana with some intent to raise the kids here, which I think worked out because kids are awesome. They love Montana, and they've been able to understand that we have some things missing here, that there are some holes. So they travel internationally, and they, you know, save their money for important cultural experiences, and they try to like soak all that in, and they're very aware of the world. And they're less, I think, their world is a little different than mine was because they have exposure to the rest of the planet that I didn't have.
Yeah. Are they fly fishers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Delaney, the youngest, is she's a great angler. She's super good, but she prefers salt. So she this summer she'll be fishing in Costa Rica and Honduras and Mexico with Fish for Change. So she works at Fish for Change, and she's working on some pilot programs there, and she also is just she's really into her favorite thing in the world is summer camp. Like, you know, it's like when you're little, what do you want to be when you're a grown up? She's like, I want to do summer camp, you know? And so this is like the perfect job for her.
Summer camp.
Yeah. So she's a student. Yeah, exactly. She's a student at MSU. She's a bobcat. Saddest thing ever, but it's okay. I guess there's worse things. She could be in meth, but she is a bobcat, Willamette. So she's in school there, but she works, you know, full time also with Fish for Change, which is great. She's a really good angler for sure. And then Ella she's getting ready to graduate in sustainability at University of Montana Western in Dillon. Okay. And she's a super good boatman. So she's a gear boater and whitewater guide. And so she's in the summertime been doing that since she started when she was 17, rowing gear, and does, for me, like on my trips, she's been an awesome trip leader. So she's a gear boater, but also trip leader. So she's in charge of like planning the whole trip. So like all of the food, the menu, getting all of the gear together and packing it and getting everything like down the river and setting up camp first. And she's really good backcountry gear boater and trip leader and raft guide. And then this summer, she's doing the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation internship up at Schaefer Meadows. So that's the very, very top of, you know, the Middle Fork of the Flathead. And so she'll be stationed up there all summer working on noxious weeds and native plants. So, wow. Yeah, that's pretty full circle for me because that's my dad's job as he's head of native plants for Glacier National Park. Growing up, he was natural resources management. And so like the whole native plants piece is, I think she was drawn to by that also. And so she's working on that. And then Killian, my stepson, is a full-time fishing guide with me in the summertime. So he and I are like 2-boat trips all the time. And he got to go into the Upper Middle Fork this last summer for the first time and guide and did awesome. And he's more like traditional fly fishing guide. Like Ella and Delaney both were pretty keen on finding something other than being a traditional fly fishing guide, because they didn't want to, I think, be like, oh, that you're the fly fishing girl. And they're like, no, that's my mom. Bye. That happened a lot growing up. They're like, yeah, not my thing,
Yeah.
And, but Killian is like, he for sure is, he's an awesome fishing guide, and he's right there.
I feel like we all kind of have that spark of rebellion at a certain age, like growing up, and then, you kind of realize that, oh, like, yeah, my parents, well, hopefully, but at least in my case, like, oh yeah, my parents were actually like pretty right on with a lot of things. Like, even though I kind of wanted to ignore it and, be 180 degrees, like in the opposite direction and away from kind of them and whatnot. But yeah, it's funny because it kind of comes around full circle sometimes. So
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I get little hints that all three of them were like, okay, like I see you. Like they kind of let me know that they appreciate some things I say, but they are also free to go their own way. And when I see them go their own way, I'm like, oh, that's the way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm like, okay, like that. They see some things I do, and then when they take their path, I'm like, shit, that was what I was looking for. Yeah. Like I missed something. That was the way. So you kind of like get to live vicariously through them, or just like be super psyched, like live another life. Like if you get to do it over, like the choose your own adventure, sometimes, you can do that with your kids. You see them go take the other path, and you're like, yeah, that was actually the path that I should have taken, or that I wanted to take, or whatever I didn't take,
All right, we'll get back to Hilary in a moment, but first, the decked truck bed organizing system is the best way to keep your gear and your sanity in order, whether you're planning a day on the water, have already gotten your lines wet, or packing up at the end of the day. No matter how you might decide to set it up, it doesn't take long to get the system dialed for the fishing and other adventuring you plan to do. Decked takes the guesswork out of packing with a product that just makes life easier, plain and simple. You'll get to the ramp first, get on the oars, get the eat, get the net, and get the satisfaction of having your gear in order. Decked products are made in the USA, and shipping is always free. Get decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish to figure out which system best fits your rig.
So you leave Portland, you come back to Montana. What was the plan for you? Did you come back with, were you thinking like, oh, maybe I'll work in journalism back here in Columbia Falls, or do something completely different?
I always felt like there was an intersection with fishing and journalism for sure. And so my last year in Portland, I left the TV station and started working with a PR agency for the outdoor industry that worked with some ski companies, fishing companies, outdoor industry companies, and pretty like high level public relations at some big international companies, and just learned about that, and felt like that could be a good way to use journalism and like traditional PR, really helping tell stories. And so I started a PR agency called Outside Media, and we handled ski and fish and stuff like that for about 10 years. And brought that back to Columbia Falls. Yep. So had that in Columbia Falls where my fly shop is now, and loved it. That was awesome. Like the storytelling piece. I could see things were really changing. I also had at the same time a traditional television fly fishing show called Trout TV. Mm-hmm. And so it was on like Sundays on CBS after, golf. In fact, it'd be the thing that'd be on if golf goes long and they needed something to like fill between like golf and the news shows, after that. So it'd be like, it'd pop on like halfway through catching a fish and you're high-fiving and stuff. So it'd be on like at super random times all the time. And Trout TV was going on during that Outside Media time for about 10 years. But I could see things were changing with news and public relations, traditional PR, and also television, of course. Like everything was just kind of moving away from that. And so I definitely didn't think that would be forever, you know?
Yeah.
And I was kind of, I guess I wouldn't say I was hoping it wouldn't be forever, but I felt like it would need to change, like the way things were. Storytelling was going to change, and it was really getting hard to tell if other people were telling the truth. You know, truth in news was really important to me, and that integrity. And I felt like that was like getting chipped away in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So it'd be a trip to be in news now, or to be in traditional PR right now. And I see it, gosh, it'd be really challenging. But there's so many things kind of trying to test you, I think. But so anyway, stopped that when I got divorced in 2016. And my ex-husband kept those pieces, Outside Media and Trout TV. Yep.
And still does it?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
So then when did the fly shop come into being?
Yeah. So I felt like when, so kind of while the Outside Media and Trout TV things were happening, and I renewed my guide's license again, and was guiding a little for just return clients, and then also to be able to do donated trips for nonprofits and stuff like that. So got my guide's license back, and then wanted to have a home base for a lot of the conservation projects that I was working on, whether it was writing projects and or just branded conservation projects. Like a lot of brands, I'd be frustrated that maybe they weren't working on certain conservation things. I'm like, how are we not speaking up for rivers, you know, within this company? And so trying to help give a voice to that, working on some movies and, you know, different storytelling stuff for different media things, and wanted a home base for that. So took part of the office from Outside Media and made it this fly shop that was also meant to be kind of a community rooted place for people to ask, not just about how to cast or where to cast or what flies to use, but also like, how can we get involved in Trout Unlimited or in Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, or like what is the story with what's happening with our watershed? What is happening with the headwaters and stuff? And just to have kind of a brick and mortar place for some of these swirling environmental themes that I was juggling.
Yeah.
And that was the idea for the fly shop. So that was kind of as part of Outside Media during, you know, what it was all kind of there. And then after I didn't have Outside Media anymore, I made the fly shop, you know, my own LLC in 2016, 17. Okay. And so, so now it's been Lary. Lary's is short for Hilary. Yeah. So it's just been my fly shop since then, since 2016 or 17. And in that little spot uptown Columbia Falls. And it still is that, like, it's a full service fly shop for sure. Like I'm an outfitter, and we, you know, run guides out of there. And another buddy of mine is an outfitter in our shop too. And he runs a bunch of guides out of there. And then I'm also the outfitter of record for Glacier Raft Company and Glacier Anglers. So the kids and I, that's where we guide, is not out of Lary's, but up at Glacier Raft Company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So where I've been since the beginning, I'm still there.
Yeah.
So I can guide out of my shop too, but it's different water. And I kind of, for me personally, I find my specialty is the whitewater. So I like the wilderness whitewater stuff. And the main stem of the flathead is awesome. I love it, but it's very different. So it's like in the adipose skiff, and it's really, it's super cool and like traditional fly fishing, mellow and like fun, and like, you know, it's lovely. But the upper stretches of the forks, which is a little bit more, I think, my style or like my preference.
More adventurous.
Yeah, it's a little rowdier is what I've done since I was a kid, and I think it's just a little bit more home to me. So yeah.
Can Aaron was telling us a story about a raft flipping.
Oh yeah, they
yesterday.
Got their ass kicked.
Yeah. Were you with him on that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
What happened? Can you tell us? Because it sounded like it was It was a fun one.
Yeah. Did he say the word fun? Because that's not a word I've heard him use in this story.
He may have said the word fun with still a look of remembered terror on his face.
Right. I think that we've brainwashed him to tell him that was fun, right? Remember that one super fun time we had? And he's like, yeah, that was fun. It may have changed the meaning of the word fun for him forever. No, so, I remember when I said before, sometimes I feel like I'm in a vacuum and I just assume everybody knows stuff that I know. And especially when you've got really good friends like Aaron, for listeners, we're talking about a mutual friend that we all in this room have, who's a great photographer and a friend of mine here in the Valley. And he's a river guy and loves to fish and everything, but has not done whitewater. And then another friend of ours, Ryan, who's done a little bit more whitewater and has a raft, but it also isn't super seasoned on some of those upper stretches. They wanted to go check out this stretch, Paola to Cascadia stretch, and do an overnight. And we were headed up there on a family trip. Eben and Killian and Ella and Delaney and I and our buddy Koreski. And we were going up just to do a fun family overnight. And this is pretty high water. It was really high water. It was 2 years ago when we had epic high water. Mm-hmm. And so for this time of year, the end of June, it was rocking. It was big. And so those guys wanted to go. And, I remember it's big, and they're like, well, cool. Can we follow you? Uh-huh. Yeah. And so, yeah, totally. So showed them the map and where we were going or where we were planning to camp and all this kind of stuff. And we were kind of, leapfrogging throughout the day and everything. And then we get to Brown's Hole, and it's a lot of times during the year, not a rapid at all. It's one of those where it's only a high water feature, but it does have a big hole. It's got a big wave train, and then it has a big recirc, and then it's got this smashing wall, that you die on.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah. And I was in my boat with Delaney. Fishing was just the two of us, and Ella and Koreski were in a boat down below us, and then Ebb and Killian are behind, and then second to last was Aaron and Ryan in their boat. And so that means they were just in front of me. So Ella goes through, and I see it kick her pretty good. And she hit it. I mean, Koreski's a photographer. She had a photographer. She was trying to send it. She was showing off. I saw her pop an oar and looked like she did it on purpose because she grabbed it in the air. She's all rad, And then I saw her it was doing some cool shit in this big rapid. And I could hear her laughing, and there's rad pictures, and it's the cover of the Yeti website and everything, Yeah. And it was so I was okay, that looks pretty big. And so I was conservative with it, and I found the line that I thought the guys behind me should take. So we go through, and I eddy out below it, but stayed in the boat. And I told Delaney to grab the throw bag just in case, because that's how big it was. And those guys were in a pretty little boat. And I didn't notice before how their boat was rigged, but it was really back heavy. And all of their overnight gear was in the back of the boat. And so I look upriver, and here they come, and they're there's no other way to say it, going the wrong way.
Not at the right spot.
And so I start giving motions for where to go. And in rafting, you point positive. You should never point at, there's a rock, you should point at where you want the people to go.
Yeah.
So pointing positive. So I'm pointing for where to go, and he's just going the opposite. I think he thinks I'm saying, there's a hole, or there's the wave, or there's an obstacle, or there's a problem or something, and I'm thinking as this is happening, I'm oh, Delaney, get that throw bag ready. 'Cause this is something's going to happen, And so she did. And sure as shit, they came through, and the second that they hit, they went right smack dab through the meat into this. It's a surfing wave and a big wave, and and it just dump trucked.
So it's just the classic, the raft got in there and just flipped right over in the wave.
Dump trucked, and as soon as they we knew. And so I'm yelling commands for them to swim into the eddy. So I'm yelling swim river right. I'm motioning swim river right.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they could get into that, out of that wave train, I can throw bags, and we had 2 bags ready and like, I'm on the sticks by now, ready to go. And they held onto the boat.
Oh.
And like in some situations, especially when you have a guide in the boat, holding onto the boat is great. Like we tell people in paddle raft trips, like grab the perimeter line, we'll get you back in the boat, even if it's overturned, But in a situation where there's nobody rowing, that boat is yanking into like the Nar. So that boat just went smashing into the wall. So those guys got worked. They're holding onto the boat and the boat just smashes into this overhang wall. And it's like this like crumbly shale wall and just shit's falling off of the wall.
God.
Rocks are falling epically and just like they're just getting chondered, just the holding onto the thing and it's smashing. And now the boat's stuck on the wall. So now it's like pin, 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 pin. And they're just getting smashed into this wall and they're holding on to it. And I'm yelling at them to let go, let go, let go. And then like a cooler comes loose and the boat gets free, but they still hold on to it. Ryan gets free. He swims opposite side, river left. And by now we know the bag's not going to work. They can't get into the eddy. So Ella sees she's downriver. Their boat comes free and it's just shooting down this fast river. And I'm whistling loud for her to go. She goes. So she's rowing hard to go get their boat. And now both guys are swimming. Ryan gets to shore and Aaron is in the rapid and he's kind of coming out to the tail end of the rapid where it gets a little shallow and he stands up in the river, which is foot entrapment central for us on this freestone. So you should never stand up in a rapid. And he just didn't know because he's like, okay, now I can self-arrest maybe is what he's thinking. Now I can stand up.
Yeah.
So he stood up. But if you stand up and the water's moving like that, the rocks will move on your feet and now your feet are stuck. And then if you lean forward or if you get bumped or you touch anything, boom, your chest and head goes down and you get covered with water and people can't get you back up.
Yeah.
So we're coming by now and he's like putting his arms up like for a rope, like save me or grab me or something. And Delaney's looking at me because she knows she can't touch him. Because if you touch this guy, he'll go down into the water.
Yeah.
So, because he's foot entrapped. So we couldn't totally tell he was foot entrapped because it looked like it because he's standing in this fast current and just knowing how that works. I'm like, he's probably foot entrapped. So, we're coming by and Delaney's like just poised to try to grab him. I'm like, don't touch him. Like, do not touch him because we won't get him back. He'll go under. And so I'm like, buddy, I'm sorry, but you got to swim. Try to lean backwards and pick your feet up and get your feet down river. And then I can throw you a bag. So he did, but he had his fly rod in his hand and he just threw it.
Yeah, that's what he said.
And I was so bummed because I actually did think he probably could have held on to it or thrown it to us or something, but threw his fly rod. And then he did what I said and like pulled his feet out of the rocks and got his feet up down river and then got on his belly and swam and we threw him a rope and he got to shore. Yeah. Wow. It was dramatic.
Hopefully we're not outing him or his buddy. Hearing him tell that story, I must have misheard part of it because I had essentially thought that he was in the boat with you.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I was like, this should be a pretty good story if we get Hilary telling this. Do you think, have you had other similar situations in your rafting career that have been like as, hairier or worse than that?
There's I don't know if it's being a female guide or I haven't talked to a lot of other women about this, but there is this feeling of like, you can't fuck up. Like you just can't, the end. Like flipping is not an option. You can't flip because you won't work here anymore, and or people won't feel safe with you or you can't go. Doesn't matter how many times, your coworkers who are men flip their boats.
Yeah.
If you do it once, that's it. And so I've always just been so conscious of like not flipping. I flipped once on a paddle raft trip when I was 23 years old and it was the worst thing ever. And it was not the worst thing ever. Nothing bad happened, but just the feeling of like, almost like I suck at this. Like it was like, well, now I need to go like flip burgers. I need to like do something different. Like I'm done.
My
That's
career
it.
is over.
Yeah, that's it. And I've seen this happen with women before too. It's like, one little thing happened. There have been women at the raft company who have like dinged a trailer, or like, tiny things have happened, or like maybe they got skunked that day fishing and somebody didn't catch fish. They're done. They're just like this feeling of just like, well, now they're talking about me at the bar, it's not like there's Hilary, there's like, oh, there's that girl who flipped her boat, or there's that girl that can't drive, or there's that girl that like wrecks trucks or whatever. You know what I mean? Like these little things that happen to dudes all the time, and they just blow it off. Like then it can't happen with women. So I flipped that one time, come close to flipping all the time. I feel like in the upper middle fork, there's pictures of me with like, my boat looks like it's going to go, and I'm just like, there's a couple moments in my life where I'm like, now I'm super religious, or I'm selling my soul to the devil. I'm not sure which one, but like, I need some help here, know? So I haven't had like the disaster, knock on wood, but I feel like I'm very experienced and very set up to not let that happen, and also super conscious of not letting that shit happen, And
then there's also that saying, like, I feel like I've heard or read, where it's kind of like, it's not a matter of if, it's kind of when. If,
Totally.
you are rafting a lot of whitewater sections and rivers and all of that. And I myself, like, I have a limited amount of whitewater experience, but I've done a number of overnight trips and I can't get enough of them. It's like my favorite thing in the world to be on a boat for like multiple days in a row. Like it is, I imagine it's not a unique opinion or feeling, but it's just, the rivers and boats. It's just kind of like, that's the best.
It's the best.
Like I just want to keep floating. Like
Kopi's always telling me to rig to flip. That's his mantra when we go on these overnighters, and it's good for me to have Kopi, because I don't think that I sometimes like really pay enough close attention to those kinds of little things, and I know that I need to learn to do it more. And so, but
no, rig to flip is huge. That's always a classic. And then it's, there's just the two kinds of people, those who have and those who will, for sure. Yeah. So just knowing that your time is coming, and also just being okay with that shit happens sometimes too. It's tough for me because I just want to mitigate all risk, but it's not on rails. Like it is a risky thing. And I think that's what's nerve-wracking also about being an outfitter at Glacier Raft Company is like, we've got 100 guides, whitewater and fishing guides.
Wow.
Yeah. And so something is going to probably happen. So really trying to train well and like, try to keep that risk down and just make sure everybody knows exactly what they're doing out there is key. But I found a little bit of complacency maybe a decade ago or so with my own self. So I started guiding on the middle fork of the salmon. I started leaving in August and doing a guest guide stint there. Cool. And I loved that. But I loved being bottom of the totem pole for sure. Nobody's looking at me for what to do. Because sometimes I would find like...
a bit less pressure.
Yeah. There was like pressure in a way of me needing to try harder, like be better, work harder, like, to be like those guys on the middle fork of the salmon, because it's not my river. I'm running a cold. Like they've been out there for 12 weeks, on back-to-back trips. I'm coming in once. So just like really focused, just trying to be really healthy. I'd work up to like being really healthy, trying to sleep and drink water and eat good food and be in shape and everything for that trip because I'm coming in, off the street. So that would be like more pressure. I felt like there was more pressure there, but I needed that because on my river, I'm like, I could do this in my eyes closed. Like literally, I lost a contact on a trip, and I was like, I don't even care. Like I know exactly where I'm going, and I know every single rock and wave at every level. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm like, that's kind of a problem. I wasn't bored, but I was like, maybe potentially had the slack off a little. Yeah,
maybe just kind of like ready for other
rivers and sections and
challenges or whatnot.
And so I almost last year on Middle Fork of the Salmon guiding, like I had a moment where I was like, oh, this boat's going upside down, you know, and it didn't. But there's like definitely kind of that feeling in the pit of your stomach where it's like, this is happening. Something's happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I for sure get nervous on the Middle Fork of the Salmon. I'm not nervous about my skills or what to do, but just kind of like this one's big, or like this one's bony or gnarly or whatever. Like I get a little, like I remember when I first started guiding there, I would pee in the boat intentionally so I wouldn't get out of my line. Because if like I would get out of the line to go pee, I couldn't get back into where I wanted to go. So I'm just like, just go, man. I would just pee.
Get
like,
washed away.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. That's why they're self-bailing, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Just don't drop your food in the bottom of the boat.
Yeah. You were about to go down and fish a tournament, right? Which you changed plans to go testify.
Yeah.
What was the tournament? What was
I'm not a big tournament person. It was
No?
no. There's a couple tournament series. There's one in particular, the Herman Lucerne in Florida, that is for conservation, and it's some of these tournaments are fundraisers for conservation. And my buddy Benny is on the board, and so I want to try. You know, we're talking about those global fisheries and being connected. I really try whenever I can to try to help them raise money and to try to be part of their fisheries and understand what's going on there. Florida in particular, I feel really connected with.
Yeah. Well, there's big stuff going on right now.
Yeah. And so we spend a fair amount of time there fundraising and just being active in those fisheries. So that was meant to be just to try to help raise money and participate in that tournament. I think that I'm not super aware of how all of it works, but there's a fair amount of tournaments that go specifically for conservation. I mean, you're with those like bonefish, tarpon, permit tournaments, there's no money. You don't win money or anything like that. You can't like bet on that fishery, which is awesome. So I like that part of tournament fishing, but I'm not a tournament angler. I'm also like not good enough for that. You know, like I in my mind I am, but also in my mind I can surf. And I have no business surfing. Like in my mind, I'm like really good at stuff. I picture myself doing things. And my mom always told me when I was a kid to visualize, you know, how you want to always visualize how you want it to go, and that'll happen. And so sometimes like I'll visualize myself climbing Everest, and I'm like, I'll maybe next weekend.
Yeah.
So that's tournament fishing is like one of those things I can picture myself.
Do you enjoy it when you go and do it?
Yeah. Like I said, I only do like the little fundraiser fun ones, not like the invitationals and like the really big things. But I always have fun. Saltwater fishing is how I like to fish, you know? So guiding for me is trout and whitewater and rivers. But for me as an angler, like I prefer to saltwater fish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you have going on? You know, what's going on these days, and what's the future looking like for you? Do you have any idea? Do you have an idea of what's going on a year from now, or 3 years, or 5 years?
Maybe. I mean, mostly same old shit, I hope, right? Yeah. I'm doing what I want to be doing for sure. So hopefully not big changes, but the big one this year is just becoming the outfitter of record at Glacier. So
what does that mean, outfitter of record?
So like in Montana, you know, every guiding company has to go through an outfitter, and all of the guides have to run through an outfitter. And so guides can't just go on their own. They have to have an outfitter sign off on them. And then an actual company like a fly shop or a rafting company or fishing company or something has to have an outfitter. And that outfitter is like responsible for the connection with the board of outfitters and the Forest Service and making sure all of the guides have their guides licenses signed and that you're in compliance. So it's a big compliance issue mostly. Okay. And then also just responsibility for the quality of the outfit. And so I've been working at Glacier Raft Company since I was a kid, and it's been a family-owned business. And the family, the Stoneman family, who I started working for, way back. That's whose kids I was babysitting and like grew up with them. They're like, they're like my family. And so they sold their company, and the company who bought it named me outfitter of record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I don't own the company Glacier. I own my company, Lary's Fly and Supply. But at Glacier, I'm the outfitter of record. So that means like I'm assigning all the guides licenses. I'm the connection with Board of Outfitters. The outfit is in my name. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
And is it a business entity, or is it more just like that as outfitter of record? I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's a weird deal. It just means like, here,
this is more like a legal designation.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at it this way. Like, you've got Fly Fish Journal has a Facebook page. There's got to be a person whose name is on it. Right.
Exactly.
So it's kind of the same type of thing. There's somebody responsible for it in the back end. And that person is the person who will lose the outfit if you have violations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they wouldn't be able to run anymore if like I didn't do my job.
Mess something up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Washington is very different. Washington is just like a free for all.
Right. I know.
I don't know if you're.
Yeah. Utah and there's lots of states that are. Yeah. I love having the responsibility be on the outfitter in a lot of ways, because it really holds accountability. Like, it makes an individual train properly. It makes, it has not just check boxes, but also like from the bottom of your gut, like there's serious consequences if your people aren't trained, or if they're not taking care of the environment, if they're not protecting the resource. Those are real things that are in your license, your outfitter license, that you have to have these really predominant features of your business, so, and also for that company, like, company that bought Glacier Raft Company is really big, and they rely on the people who are the eyes and the ears and on the ground, because a corporation doesn't have that. It needs the people, So they're great about that, and they rely on that. Yeah. Nice. So that's big for me, because it's 185 employees at peak, 100 guides. It's a big operation. So we're running the half day and full day whitewater trips, multi-day trips in the wilderness. The wilderness permit is part of this, which is pretty exclusive. It's not, there's only a couple.
Like a limited number of them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even just on the Forks of the Flathead, there's 4 operators, whereas on the main stem where my shop is, there's dozens of outfitters. So, yeah. So it's cool. Awesome. I enjoy it. I like it. For me, it's the way to protect the wilderness. So being responsible for it in an official capacity is, I feel like, the pinnacle of my life. This whole time I'm scrapping to try to protect the upper middle fork.
Yeah.
And that comes with just like trying to use your voice, like we talked about, and kind of have some political will and stuff like that. But now being attached to the outfit is really, like, for me, has some teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. This will be the first summer this will
be my first summer as outfitter of record. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I guess before we go, I just wanted to give you a chance to shout out.
Can you shout it out? Shout it out, man.
I'll try to shout it out. Just give you a chance to shout out, where people can find you, things they should look out for, any projects you're working on, issues you're working on that you want people to be aware of, what's going on in the next 6 months or so with all that stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Well, when we talked about the pendulum, like swinging, and I'm really appreciate the pendulum. I'm very aware of the pendulum swinging. It's at a time right now where, for me, it's on all of these boards. So I'm on a fair amount of industry boards, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers board of directors. And so I encourage people to participate in your local chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And the reason that I'm on that board is because I feel like, from a national standpoint, it's a way for me to understand and connect with a lot of issues that are important outside of Montana. So corner crossings are huge in Montana, but also seeing what rulings are happening in Wyoming and other states, and looking at stream access situations in New Mexico and Utah, can also be key to Montana. So that's why I do the national board, or North American board rather, instead of just the state, is just to try to work on that connectivity. And then if, those same things we were talking about in the Northeast and the Southeast and Florida, it's a tangible way to try to help work on a lot of those issues. So Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is really important to me, and I feel does a really great job on policy and advocacy for public lands, wildlife, and water.
Yeah.
And then Protect Our Winters. I'm on the national board of that as well. And again, the key initiative going into this next year for POW is going to be water and water issues. And that is, from a surfer standpoint, or from a sailor standpoint, a paddler, a rafter and kayaker, and certainly angler, and connecting a lot of the issues we see. Like, I was at a POW board meeting the other day and saying, they said, you think it's a good idea to keep these pursuits together, or should we separate them or whatever? I said, we run into each other out there in the wild all the time. And we're having tailgate conversations and around campfire conversations, and we're talking about water all the time. We are all together on it. And I think the more people can talk about their water quality issues, water reservation situations they're having issues with, all kinds of different land and water discussions, the more they can do that, the better, despite your pursuit. And so that's key. I'm on the board there. And I'm on the AFTA board, which is the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. So that's for me, mostly as a retailer. So I've got a shop and care about the trade. So this is a trade level kind of thing, where it's trying to make sure that we have really great representation within the industry. I'm on the DEI, the chair of the DEI committee there, and just really trying to help our industry reflect who we are in the world. And so that's key. I encourage people to join AFTA for sure. You don't have to be a retailer or a guide or an outfitter. Any angler can join AFTA, but it helps you have a voice in the trade. It helps you be in the industry, which is great. And then Northern Rockies River Council, which is part of American Rivers, and it's kind of these regional weigh-ins to help American rivers understand what's going on in these different river communities. And so the Northern Rockies River Council really weighs in on what's happening kind of across the Mountain West with rivers, to help decide what rivers are endangered, which ones really need some special attention, where can we add legislation at the headwaters, to get more rivers on the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. It's kind of the primary thing for American rivers. And then locally, we've got the Flathead River Alliance. So I'm on the advisory council there to just try to help get to a place where we can have a good comprehensive river management plan, working multi-agency stuff with the Forest Service, Park Service, and local communities. And so that's, those are, I would say, if people want to find me, they can find me, but those are the things that I'm really trying to focus on and hope that they drive attention to.
That's all you're doing?
Well, go Grizz.
Come on, Hilary. How do you find time for anything else?
It's all connected. Like I was saying before, sometimes when something comes out in left field, like the swim team kids are coming into my fly shop and need to raise money, I'm like, oh, we have a swim team still? Cool. Like, it's like, I feel disconnected in a lot of other important things in my community. And that can be a little bit tough, but the pendulum will swing back maybe when I have grandkids or something like that, you know? But right now it's in kind of that level. So
that's amazing. It's amazing and pretty inspiring. And, we're lucky to have people like you in this industry that are just nose to the grindstone, just going. So
we're all, if we're living, we're grinding, right? I mean, wintertime too, like, don't get me wrong. I sleep in and eat a fair amount of nachos and, so I'm fine.
Seems well deserved.
Yeah. That's what I think.
Got to find that balance. Mm-hmm. So, well, thanks again, Hilary.
Yeah.
It's great to see you. Maybe we should go fishing, huh?
Let's go. Finally.
Let's go fishing.
I thought I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing here, and you just like gaslit me into a microphone.
We're just gonna talk for like 3 or 4 hours, like no pressure. Like, oh, the sun's down. Sorry.
Oops.
Thanks for listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. Sidechannels is produced and edited by yours truly, with production support from Jeff Galbraith and Colin Wiseman, and digital and web support from Jesse Lou Galbraith, Colby Messick, and Kopi Voita. If you're enjoying Sidechannels, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to rate and review the show. It makes a big difference. And thanks as well to our sponsors. Decked. Get decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish. And Patagonia. Dependable gear built to connect with wild fish. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fish to learn more. As always, have fun out there, enjoy the process, and we'll see you in a couple weeks with episode 7.